And this is where what Python has to what take a decision. And Python says what? Hold on, I've been to the file storage before and I have imported the file storage and loaded in the sys.models. Hear me carefully. I really want you to understand the drill over here. Calm your nerves. Stay at a place, get a pen and a paper, pay rapt attention, because in this video I will be explaining to you every single detail. I will not be leaving any pin or any stone untouched in terms of what understanding what is a secular import, what causes a secular import, and how to fix a secular import. So this is like the nightmare to most of Python developers, because they don't actually want to understand what causes it. They just want to know the fix. But the secular import does not have a fixed pattern. It does not have a fixed rule on how to occur. So what can you do to yourself? The best thing you can do to yourself is to understand what causes it. And if you know a cause to a disease, you can actually know how to solve or abstain from that disease. So that is what I want to do in this video. Hello, welcome. So in this video, we'll be basically doing we're basically restructuring our project. So in our last video, we was able to create our base model and our file storage and serialize and deserialize. That was pretty much everything we did in our previous video, right? And in this video, we'll be doing something different, which is restructuring our project. And if you kind of notice, you notice that I'm a bit relaxed in this video. And why so? It is so because I will be teaching you, or I will be taking my time to teach you a lot of concepts that you need to understand and a lot of things that are happening in our code when we import a model. So it's going to be like a very detailed video or tutorial, right? Because I will take my time and also want you to pay rapt attention and follow me as we do as we write and also try to restructure our project together. We're going to learn how to fix a secular import and what causes a secular import, how the import system works when we import a model, what happens behind the scenes. All of these we're going to look into in this video in order to understand how to fix a secular import and what causes a secular import, because you'll be running into a secular import definitely. But I don't want to tell you that this is what causes secular import, or just if you run into this, just fix it. No, I want to teach you the reason, the cause of secular import, because it does not have a fixed pattern of a way that it occurs. It can occur in any time in your project, because why? Your project gets very, very big and bigger. So secular import is always prone to happen. But if you really understand how and what causes secular import, you can be able to fix it regardless of anywhere or anytime it happens in your application. So we'll be looking into it in a very great depth in this video. Trust me. So let's even check if our application is still working fine, right? So everything is still in good shape. So let's run our code and do Python 3 base model. So everything is still working fine. The base model was created. And let's check the file storage. So 719 and 719. So everything is still in perfect shape, right? Makes sense. So let's kind of restructure our project. Let's divide this model. Let's take the base model, keep in one model in one file, and take the file storage and keep it in one file, right? And kind of import them and run our application again. As easy as it is, right? That's perfect. So we'll come over here. Let me show you our project structure. So this is how our project structure is going to look like. So project, or should I just make this doc string? So this is going to be our project structure. So you know what we are trying to build. So project structure is going to be, so we'll have models. So we're going to have our application definitely. So it's going to be Airbnb. So instead of Airbnb, we'll have a models package. So this is a package. Then inside of the models package, we're going to be having We're going to be having an engine package. Right? So this is the structure of our application. And why do we need to put all our model in a package? So do you know what is a package? So a package is something like a container. So how do you think of a package? Think of a package as a wardrobe. So in your wardrobe, what do? You get your maybe the clothes you wear to church, arrange them in some certain part of your wardrobe. get the one for like dinner, the ones for maybe casual outings, the ones for classes, and you can arrange them in section, right? So that's basically what we'll also be doing in our application. So we'll be saying what every single module, let's organize them in a directory called what a package. So that directory is like a container, a box. So we'll be packing every single related module in that container called what a module. And every single module, when I say module, what I mean is file. So a single file is called, in Python it's called a module, right? Then every single file or every single module that will be operating on our file storage or on our database, we are going to assemble them in a package called the engine. Is it making sense? So we're going to assemble them in a package called what? Engine. That's pretty it. That's pretty everything we have to do in this our application, and we are good. So, but before that, we need to include what is called an underscore init dot py file to make our directory a package. So if we don't include init.py, it's not a package. So we're going to include it in order to make it a package. And we'll see the essence of including that init.py in our package. You will see the essence of doing something like that, right? So let's move over to our terminal and kind of recreate or create this project structure, right? So now let's go to our terminal and create this project structure, right? So we'll come over here, and we currently just have a single directory which has base model, debug print, and file.json. So now we have to create the models, right? Then we'll move into the models, and we'll have to create the underscore init underscore.py to make it what? A package, right? Then we'll have to create so inside of the models, we'll have to create the engine, as we said. Look at, we have to create the engine, right? Then we'll move into the engine and create the underscore dot py. So if you are familiar with CLI, this is just a way to create a file using the CLI, right? I just love working with the CLI. Then, so that's it. So what can we now do? We can create a file storage inside the engine, and that's it. So that's it. So if we come over here, let me show you what we did. So if we do tree, so that's what I told you. So look at it. We have models, we have init.py, and we have an engine package inside of the models file.storage.py. Can you see the true representation, right? So what we can do now is we can now move the base model inside the models. Makes sense, right? Then inside the models, we are good. Can you see? We are good, right? So now that we are done creating our project directories and our project structure, right? Let's start, let's start copying and pasting this code to the appropriate files, right? So we'll copy the whole file storage, and we'll come to the file storage model and paste it. And over here, we'll have to be taking all of these out. So we'll not be instantiating any object in that model, right? So that's why we are doing what we are doing. That's why we are structuring it using a package. Then over here, we need to import the base model, right? You can see it's giving us error. So we do from models, and I will explain why we are doing from models.base model import base model. So do you know what we have to do from models.base model? Remember, this is a package. Are you following? So this is a package, and if we want to import a file that is inside of a package, we have to call the package name and then use a dot and access that file that we want to import. Making sense, right? So that's why we are using models.base model. Makes sense, right? So we also need to import the JSON model. So we just do import JSON. And I think we're good by now. So yeah, we should be good. And that's it. That's basically everything we need to do. So now, what do we have to do? We have to what? We have to start instantiating our classes and, print to the standard output and see the results, right? So now in our base model, we need to get hold of the file storage class, right? So we have to instantiate the file storage in our base model. So how can we do that? We could just basically come over here So first off, let's instantiate our base model, right? Then we say model is equal to base model. Then after that, we have to instantiate our file storage. Before we can instantiate our file storage, we need to import the file storage from the file storage model. So we do from models, remember I have to call models.engine because it's set of the engine dot file storage. That's the particular model it is. Import what? Import the file storage. Perfect. Then we now have to come over here and do storage is equal to file storage. Then we have to basically just print our model to first of all see what we are working with. And if we print over here, moment of truth, we run into what? We run into a circular import. And this is the time it gets interesting because I want you to calm your nerves, stay at a place, get a pen and a paper, pay rapt attention because in this video I will be explaining to you every single detail. And what I mean, I will not be leaving any pin or any stone untouched in terms of what? Understanding what is the circular import, what causes a circular import, and how to fix a circular import. So this is like the nightmare to most of Python developers because they don't actually want to understand what causes it. They just want to know the fix. But the circular import does not have a fixed pattern. It does not have a fixed rule on how to what? On how to occur. So what can you do to yourself? The best thing you can do to yourself is to what? Understand what causes it. And if you know a cause to a disease, you can actually know what? You can actually know how to what? Solve or abstain from what? That disease. So that is what I want to do what? In this video. So first of all, before you can understand how circular import works and every single thing or every single concept revolving around circular import, let me take you through the words of what? The import system of Python. I need you to get your pen and a paper. So you know that when Python, or when you try to import a model in Python, what actually happens? Python just goes to the model and does what? And imports what? The whole model. But before Python is certified, or before Python can certify that it's done importing a model, Python has to what? Has to get to the downmost part of the model. So if Python should get to here, that means Python is done importing that model. And let's check if that happened. So let's put a print over here and say print last part of file storage. And here we say what? We say print beginning of file storage. So come with me. Right? So let's run our code again and see what happens. Nothing was printed into the standard output. Nothing. If I copy this over here and paste here and say before import in the file storage. Let's print again. Perfect. This is what I want you to understand. It says what? Before import in the file storage. So it came over here and it's hot. So what happens? How does Python import? So whenever you import a model, Python does what? Python keeps track of the model that you imported in what is called what? In a model called the sys.model. Write this down. Because I promise you that I'm going to do justice to this very confusing and hard concept called the circular import in Python. The most feared concept in Python, or the most, how do I even put it? It's like the concept that every Python developer don't even want to face. Like they are scared of encountering a circular import. I was reading an article and the person said that the way he solves circular import is whenever he encounters a circular import, he just dumps every single model in one file. It's a very bad design. Don't design a software application like that. But if you understand circular imports, you will feel very, very proud of yourself. And that is what I want to teach you in this video. So let's get back to what business. So I'm saying all this so that you kind of like stay back and listen to me, right? So you don't like freak out. So that's what like I'm giving you like a motivation. So I'm doing like motivational speaking right now. So now what happened over here? As I was saying, if you import a model, Python keeps track of the model you imported here in a model called sys.models. And when Python keeps track of it in the sys.model, whenever you want to import the model again, Python has to do what? Python has to go first of all to the sys.models and check if you have already imported the model before. If you have, Python will do what? Python will load it from the cache of what? Of the sys.model in order to what? In order to improve the efficiency of what? Python interpreter. Instead of going back to the model to import again, it just loads from the cache of what? Of the sys.model. Because loading a model requires what? Requires Python reading the model, because Python is an interpreted language. Though it's a compiled and interpreted language, but most like to be precise, it's what? An interpreted language. So it has to interpret from top to bottom before it imports any single model. So instead of constantly doing this, Python just has a cache, which is called what? Sys.models, that it just gets every single model that it has imported what? Before, towards to improve what? Python efficiency. So if that is the case, what then causes a secular import? So what causes a secular import, as we all know, is when what? When two models depend on each other for what? For functionality. Model A is imported from model B, and model B is imported from model A. Basically that. But it's way beyond that. And if we check what happened in our own scenario, very straightforward. We are over here and we said what? We said from models.engine.file storage import file storage. Right? And Python says what? Okay. And look at it. From models.engine in the traceback, from models.engine import file storage. And Python says what? Okay, fine. Let me go to the file storage. And Python does what? Gets to the file storage. And on arrival to the file storage, Python jumps another what? Another import command that says what? From models.base model, import the base model class. Python says what? All right. Python goes to what? To the sys.model and checks the sys.model. So sorry, I forgot to mention that when you did from models.engine.file storage import file storage, Python actually went to the sys.model, checked the cache. There was nothing like file storage in there, so it has to now go to the file storage and what? And import it. So on arrival, Python sees what? Import base model in the file storage. Python does what? Python checks the sys.models to verify if the base model has been imported before. And if it checks and it has not been imported before, Python what? Python goes back to the base model. But if it has, Python will have to do something over there. But right now, at this instance, it has not been imported before. There was never an import base model prior to now, right? So Python does what? Python moves back to the base model. And if you look at this traceback, this traceback is what gives you everything that occurred. And in this traceback, look at it first went to the file storage. It now came back to the base model, and on arrival back to the base model, it encountered what? It encountered the same prompt or the same command that sent it to the file storage previously, right? And what is the command? The command is what? From models.engine.file storage import file storage. And this is where what? Python has to what? Take a decision. And Python says what? Hold on, I've been to the file storage before, and I have imported the file storage and loaded in the sys.models. Hear me carefully. I really want you to understand the drill over here. I have been to the file storage before, and I've imported the file storage file and loaded what? To the sys.models. Is it making sense? But the only problem here is that I have not instantiated, or I have not loaded every single part of the file storage into the file storage model. And what is every single part of the file storage? I have not loaded this class of file storage. I have not loaded anything. I have not loaded the reloaded, the save, the new. I have not loaded anything. Even if we come over here and we have A is equal to what? Something like this. And we have B is equal to 434. All of these you cannot access. Why? Because Python has loaded this file storage in the sys.models, but it has not instantiated, or it has not bounded every single properties, attributes, variables, functions of that file storage into the file storage model that is located in the sys.models model. Is it making sense? So now what will happen? What will happen is that Python has to do what? Python has to take a decision. Python has to say what? You know what? Since I have loaded the file storage into the sys.models, that means presumably I have also loaded the file storage class. So what is actually happening here that we are encountering this circular import is that Python is doing what? Python is actually assuming that since I have loaded the file storage file, just the file, that means I might also have loaded the file storage class and every single method function of that file storage model inside of what? Inside of the file storage object itself. So Python is kind of assuming right now. And Python will say, okay, so since that is the case, let me just ignore going back to the file again. So let me not go back to the file and try to import the file storage again, since I already have it in my sys.module. Let me do what? Let me just go to the cache, which is the sys.modules, and do what? And try to access the file storage class. And that is where the problem now what? Comes up. Because when Python now goes to what? Python now goes to the sys.modules and access the file storage object and tries to what? And tries to get the file storage class from the file storage object. Python what? Python cannot find what? The file storage class inside of what? Inside of the file storage object, which is the file storage itself, the model. It cannot find the class inside of the model because the class has not been loaded into the what? Into the object. It just loaded what? Just loaded an empty object. So think of what is happening as what? As you go into your friend's house address, get into the house, you've arrived to the house. But now, you've not what? You've not gotten to your friend's particular room address. It's making sense, right? You've not gotten to the particular room address, but you've gotten to the You've gotten to the hotel, but you've not gotten what? To the particular room. So you only know the address of the room, but you've not gotten access to what? To the room, the number itself. So that is what? That is actually what is happening here. Python has loaded the file, but he has not loaded every single object of what? Of that file storage model. But now Python is what? Python is assuming and trying to what? And trying to what? And trying to import it for you. So when Python tries to import it for you, instead of going back to go and call the file storage again, it just goes to the sys module. So when it goes to the sys module and tries to access the file storage class from the file storage, what will now happen? It echoes an error and says what? And now says, this is what the error is. It now says, cannot import name file storage from partially initialized model, models.engine.file storage. If you heard the English correctly, it said what? From partially initialized model, models.engine.file storage, which means that what? That the file storage was initialized. What does that mean? It means that it has been loaded into the sys.module, but it was not properly initialized. And what does properly initialization mean? Properly initialization simply means that what? It has not loaded every single class and every single method or every single variable that is inside of that file storage, inside of what? Inside of the file storage model, inside of the file storage itself. So it's what? It's semi-initialized, which is what they use, partially initialized. Because the file storage object is what? Is in the sys.modules. And we're going to inspect it when we fix the circular import. And you will see it's in the sys.module. The only problem is that what? The file storage class has not been what? Loaded into the file storage module. And it says what? It gives you a hint and says, most likely due to a circular import. So, people always think that the circular import is like the main thing. Yeah, it's like the main thing, but Python is actually telling you that when I was trying to access file storage, I could not find it in the file storage that I loaded in the sys.module. Maybe somehow, what caused it is maybe you had something like circular import going on your code. So Python is kind of suggesting an error to you. And if I may ask you, is circular import a bug or a defense mechanism? So like I'm asking you now, is it a bug or a defense mechanism from Python interpreter? So you can answer in the comment section. So for me, I feel like it's a defense mechanism. So why? So the reason is that if not for that mechanism, what do you think will happen? This import system will never end. It will just keep going like this. Cycle, until maybe it crashes your system. Because at the instance that Python interpreter got to the file storage send it back to the base model send it back to the file storage send it back to the base model. They keep doing it vice versa. Till infinity, it becomes an infinite loop. So that's why it's like circular input. So it keeps on rotating. So in order to defend from a scenario like that, Python included the circular import catch. So that whenever it detects something like that going on, it just halts immediately. If not for this kind of a mechanic, it will just keep rotating, and it might be a problem. It might crash your PC. So for me, I feel like it's a defense mechanic and not necessarily a bug. So if you have a proper project design, not like you will totally not encounter circular import now, but what? At least you will mitigate it to some certain extent. And if you encounter, you will know how to fix. So knowing what causes circular import and knowing everything about circular import, that what Python is actually trying to what import from double models. Then aside from it, it was reading from the sys.model, and in the sys.model, it has loaded that object, but that object was partially initialized, which means it does not have every single attribute and every single variable or every single method or function that you are requesting of. So now, knowing what causes a circular import, how then can we fix it? That's the major problem. How can we fix it after knowing what causes the circular import? And I want to believe so much that you now understand what triggers a circular import, right? It is most likely from a partially initialized model, which is a model that has been loaded, but Python has not initialized every single object of that model or every single attribute or functions or method. And you will get to see this in practice when we are done restructuring on our project. And I will actually show you what I mean by this partially initialized model. But now let's just at least focus on resolving the circular import for the meantime, right? So what else can trigger circular import? Bad design. So this our application actually is a bad design, a very, very big bad design. But I just actually introduced this so that I can actually show you many places that circular imports can surface. And I think we'll be fixing like 4 or 5 circular imports in this video so that you get to see circular imports in all ramification and every single angle that they can surface, right? Then, so knowing this, let's now try to fix the circular import. So with this in mind, we can actually introduce some bad design, just at least to stir you up and kind of give you a hint of how this actually works. So what can we do? So first off is that we can actually delay the import. So what does that mean? It means that if we come to this base model right now, we can actually check our code. And if we check our code, what is the best case? What is the best thing that we can actually do over here? So if we check our code, we can see that this file storage, we actually need it over here, right? So which means somehow we need it at the top of this at the top of this base model. But if we go over to our file storage, you can see that this base model that we called over here, we actually only needed this base model just instead of this file storage. So for that reason, what can we do? We can now say, instead of calling this base model immediately, you know what? Let's take this and do what? And paste it in the reload method, because that's the only place we need the base model. And we can what? We can also take this and paste over here. So this is what? This is one mechanic of what? Of delaying what? The import system. So if we delay the import system, we can what? We can kind of avoid circular import. But this is what? A pretty bad design that you don't want to do. It's a bad design. We will what? We'll be improving till we get to what? We'll get to the best design, which is when we start working properly with our packages. So this is what, like, the first instance. So this is a very bad design. Don't even do this. But I'm showing you that you can do it, but it's a bad design actually. So let me explain what is actually happening here. We are saying what? At the first instance, do you know what you can do? Just go and import the file storage for us. And instead of the file storage, it comes to the file storage and it just tries to import, and it does not see any import over here aside from the ingesting. So it just runs from here, and imports the file storage also, couple it to the file storage model, and goes down to this place and import every single thing over here. Then it gets back to the base model. And on reaching to the base model, it instantiates this model, because this is just to instantiate the model. Know that. It instantiates this model. Then after instantiating a model, it tries to instantiate the file storage. But you know that it has already imported the file storage from the file storage model. It will not go back to the file storage again. It will just do what? It will just go to the sys.model, get the file storage class from the file storage object, and instantiate it and print your model. So now we will not have a circular import, and I'm pretty sure about it. And let's try and even see what will happen. And let's run our code, believing God, my eyes closed. Did we have a circular import? Did we? And no, we didn't. So we didn't have a circular import. And if we check our print, you can see what happened. We say from models.engine file storage, import file storage, the rest of the file storage, and at this instant, it just went down to the last part of the file storage. Can you see? So it reached the last part of the file storage immediately, and it returned back to the base model. And on arrival, it instantiated the file storage and printed the model. So now we are what? We are done what? Resolving the first what? Circular import that we encountered in our application. Okay. So we are done what? We are done resolving the first circular import that we encountered. So in the next video, we try to what? Improve our design, because now we're having a very bad design. So we're going to try to what? Improve our design by introducing what? Introducing another file and what? And stop calling or instantiating these models inside of the base model. So we're going to what? We're going to instantiate in a separate file, right? I think so. That is what? That is like a first step of what? A proper design. Makes sense, right? So let's move over to this next video. Welcome back. So we are still what? We are still in the journey of what? Restructuring our project. And in the previous video, we kind of saw a way to what? Bypass the circular import, which I echoed strictly that what? It's a very bad design. You don't want to do that, right? But that's just like a way that you can actually kind of use to bypass a circular import, maybe in a very small application that you are playing around with. But when you're building like a production code, you don't want to do that. It's a very bad design, software design. So in this application, we try to what? Improve our project structure by doing what? By introducing what is actually like something like a run.py or like an interactor. So what we can actually do is we can actually stop instantiating our models in the model. So we can actually just take this out, and you know what can we now do? We can now create a file that helps us import from the file storage, import from the base model, and do what? And instantiate our base model object instead of importing between the two files. Is it making sense? So perfect. So what we can now do, let's go over here and create the file. So we say touch. So let's call it console.py. So we'll come here and we'll open the console.py. So remember that we have to fix the bad boy we had over here. So we just have to take this. So our bad design, we're trying to fix it to some extent. So we'll take this up and just maintain everything the way it was previously. And yeah, so I think we are good right now. And if we run the base model, I think we are good now. So we're still having a circular import. Okay, yeah, fine and good. So we have to just take this off and run again. So yeah, so we're no longer having a circular import, but we are not printing any output. So what we can now do is we can now come to the console and say what? And say from models dot base model, we want to import what? We want to import the base model. Makes sense? Then we are saying from models dot engine dot file storage, import what? Import the file storage. Then now we have to instantiate, and we say, okay, it's like I have it over here. Okay, yeah. So we just have to instantiate, and let's run our code and see if we're going to have a circular import, and run our code. Perfect. We're no longer having a circular import. Yeah, it's working. So what happened? We said what? From models of base model, import base model. It rushed to the base model. On arrival to the base model, it did not encounter any single import. So it just ran down and got to the downmost part of the base model. And after that, it returned back to the console.py, and the console.py said what? From models.engine.file storage, import the file storage. So he went to the file storage. So you have to check the sys.model. Remember, it always has to check the sys.model. So he checks the sys.model, and the sys.model does not have an entry for the file storage, meaning that the file storage has not been imported in the sys.model. So he has to do what? He just has to rush to the file storage. And on arrival, he sees what? He sees from models.base model, import base model. And remember that he has already imported base model into the sys.model, so it will no longer go back to the base model again. It just what? It just goes to the sys.models and check. So checking there, it has already imported it. He says what? Don't worry yourself, I've already imported the base model. He just rushes down and prints out every single thing over here, and comes back to the console.py, instantiate the base model, instantiate the file storage, because all of them are now accessible, and print the output. Perfect. So can you see, we are able to do what? We are able to now restructure our project in a very good way. So now we kind of bypassed what? Circular import with this what? Software design approach. Is it making sense? But now we have a problem. And what is the problem? The problem is we've not saved this data in our database. You are aware of that, right? So how can we do that? We could just say storage.new, and we pass our model, and we do our storage.save. So right now, if we run our code again, we get the output, which is AAB for the ID, and we go to the file storage is AAB, and everything is working perfectly. But now, if you know how softwares are being designed, you know that softwares are being designed that you interact with every single application using one how do I put it? Using one object. So you interact with just like one base model, and that is why we have a base model. Because now we will be having a users class, amenity class, place class, etc. You don't want to keep doing this for every single class you have. So every single class you have to what? You have to call this user. You have to call this amenity. No, it will not make any sense. So what can we now do? We can now say, instead of doing something like this, you know what? That is why we created a base model. And if you check our base model has a save method. So what we are trying to achieve here is that whenever we want to save an object, we just have to call the base model save. And you save the object regardless of any object. If it's user, if it is amenity, if it is place, this save will also save it. Then whenever we want to create a new object, we just have to what? Whenever we want to create a new object, we just have to what? Pass the self of this base model into that object, into the new method into the new method that is inside of our file storage. Does it make sense? So let me show you what I mean. So what I mean is that whenever we want to create a new object. So you know that before we can be able to save a new object in this our file storage, we have to add that object into into the new method before we can serialize it using the save method, right? So which is what we are basically doing here, which is storage.new. So we are now saying, let's take this storage.new and this storage.save. So let's not interact with the storage file. Let the storage file just be for instantiating the storage. Then let's come over here in the base model. So when we want to save, we can just paste this in here. So when we want to save, we can basically call the save method of the base model. And when we want to create a new instance, we could just pass it over here. Is it making sense? So we are saying whenever we want to save, call this save. Whenever we are creating a new base model, just pass it over here. So over here we have to pass self. So you see now we've run into what? Another problem, because this storage is not accessible inside of the base model, right? It's not accessible inside of the base model. So we need a way to get the storage inside of the base model. Is it making sense? So what can we do? We could go back to our console again and kind of take this away and take our storage from here, get back to the file storage and come over here and instantiate it. So what can we now do? We have to now go back to the base model again and also do what? And also do from models.engine.file storage import file storage, right? Sorry, we have to just import the storage variable because we've already instantiated it. Is it making sense? So now we have it. So back in our console, we're just calling the base model, right? So we just have to run again. And yes, another secular import. What is the secular import saying now? It's saying cannot import name base model from partially initialized model. And if you check the traceback, very straightforward. The traceback says from models.baseModel import base model, which is over here, it goes to the base model. So it checks the sys.model and the base model is not over there, it goes to the base model. And in here it says from models.engine.file storage import file storage, it goes to what? It goes to the file storage. And on arrival, it says what? From models.baseModel import base model. Remember that the console has already sent it on an error for the first before. So it has to what? It has to go back to the base model. But now it has to what? Check the sys.model. Checking the sys.model, the base model object has already been loaded into the sys model. So what will it do? It will try to access this base model. And on accessing it, this base model has not been initialized with what? With the object or with the file itself. So it says what? Cannot import what? Name base model from partially initialized models.base model. Most likely what? A circular import. Is it making sense? So we are what? We are in the spirit of restructuring our project. So how can we fix that? We can actually what? Read the trace back again and see the problem. So in this scenario, what can we actually do? So seeing that we only need the storage over here, so we can actually say what? We can actually still say, take this boy, come over here, paste it, and also come over here and paste it. So since we'll be needing it just inside of these two places, don't import it at the beginning. Just import it at this instance that we need it. And if we run again, we should not have a circular import. And perfect. We don't have a circular import because everything will import from beginning to the end. So we are only importing at the instance that we need it. Is it making sense? So this is what? This is also a way to bypass circular import. We are in the spirit of restructuring. And now, this is actually what? Still a bad design. You don't want to do this. But I'm just showing you that circular import will always what? Occur. But if you know how it works, you can fix it at any instant. You will not be what? Afraid of circular import. Just what? From you knowing how it works. You can see how I fix them very easily. Because I understand what? I understand how it works. Even if my model gets to million models, I will just have to calm down and read the traceback and fix my import and restructure my software design. And now we are good. But this is just what? A way of bypassing. We are what? We are heading somewhere. And in the next video, we will what? We'll be seeing the final solution on how to what? Restructure our project using our package. Because we have a package, and I told you that we have a file called init__.py, and it has a value. It's not just there for aesthetics. It has a value. It has a reason. So in the next video, we'll be seeing the purpose of what? Of the __init.py and how we can help us to do what? Restructure our project in a very good manner to avoid a circular import. And that is it. Thank you so much. Catch you in the next slide. Welcome back to the final stage of this restructuring of our project and looking into what causes a circular import, what is a circular import, and how to fix a circular import. So now we've actually fixed it. We've actually fixed like 2 circular imports, right? With a bad design. I'm sorry to say that, but like yeah, we've actually seen like a way to bypass the circular import, right? I mean a small application. So now we're actually going to improve our application so that we can, restructure our application in a proper way, which is what? Making use of the __init.py file in order to have a very structured application, right? So if we run our code, everything is still working perfectly. So we just have to open this and let me show you something. So in here we have what? __init.py. And also in the engine, we also have __init.py. And now, do you know the function of this __init.py? So this __init.py, I'll just be calling it init.py. Please, I think that it's very long calling it __. So the init.py, do you know how it works? So how it works is that whenever we put anything inside of there and we import the package that the __init.py is inside, you know what will happen? Python will execute every single code inside of that __init.py. I don't know if you understand what I said. Anything we put inside of the init.py, look at it. So if we come over here in this init.py that is in the models and we do print hello world, what do you think will happen if we run our code? Hello world gets okay, sorry, I have to run from this console. Hello world gets printed out first off. Look at it. Hello world. First of all, but we are not calling the __init.py. How then is it first of all calling what? Hello world. I'm running the console.py. Look at my head. I'm running the console.py. But what we see in our standard output first off is what? Hello world from this __init_.py. So what does that entail? It entails that whenever you import a module that has an init.py, that module that underscore init.py does what? Gets to execute first before every other module in your what? Project structure or your project directory. Is it making sense? So having that in mind, let's use that to our own advantage and what, and restructure our application. So what can we now do? We can now say, instead of instantiating the file storage over here, let's take it and let's not instantiate anything inside of what? Inside of our file storage. Yeah, it kind of makes sense we don't instantiate anything in our modules, right? Let's not instantiate anything over here and just come in our init.py and say from modules.ng.file storage import file storage. Then over here we can now instantiate the storage. Then we now do this. Is it making sense? In the init.py. So we now need this storage in our base model. So what we can now do is what? We can now come over here and say from we just have to do from modules import what? Storage. Can you see it's accessible? Import storage, because anything there will be global to what? To every single module in our application. So can you see we are importing what? We are importing storage from what? From the init_init.py. So now we can now access storage over here, and we can also access storage over here. So we just have to take these boys out and also take this one out. So now we are good. So now if we run our application again, we are perfect, and we are what? Done with this whole circular import thing. Thank you, God. I really appreciate you for bringing us this far, right? So now if we run our application and we have a circular import, oh my word, we still have another circular import even after our fix. Does that mean that we are not smart? I mean, we fixed it, but we're having a circular import. And I want you to pause this video, trace what causes circular import using this traceback, and know if you can fix it yourself. And when you're back, you continue this video. I beg on you, do this for me. This one time I asked you for a favor. You will do it, right? Thank you so much. So let's read the traceback and see what the traceback is saying. From the traceback, you can understand your error or you can restructure your design, right? So read with me. So it says from models. So first of all is what? From models.baseModel import base model, which is coming from our console, right? Look at it. Then the console checks the sys.models path, and the sys.models path does not have a base model object or base model module in the sys.model path. So it goes to the base model and tries to import the base model. On arrival, it sees a command that says what? From models import storage. So it goes to what? It goes to the _init_py. On arrival, it checks what? It checks, before it goes to this _, it has to check the catch, which is sys.model. I used to forget to include it while I'm explaining, but just know that whenever it has to import, it always has to check the sys.models. So just in case I miss a step. So after checking, it sees that it's not here, so it has to go over here. So remember that we are trying to what? We are trying to import the storage variable, which is in this init file, right? Which is this. So on arrival, it says what? From models, we're in the init right now. From models file, import file storage, which is the second traceback over here, right? It checks the sys.models and it cannot find the file storage, so it goes to the file storage. Do you see how many places the Python interpreter goes to what? Just to instantiate your base model. So a lot is actually happening behind the scene just to instantiate your base model, and I'm taking you through that trip. So now we are in the init. So the init sends to the file storage. It checks the sys.model. It did not find. It gets to the file storage. On arrival to the file storage, it gets to see another command again that says what? From models to base model import base model. But here lies the question: when we did the console.py, or when we call the console.py and ask the console.py to import from the base model, did they really import it from the base model? Let's say from our traceback. And in our traceback, it seems like it went to the base model. And with what we described earlier, whenever the interpreter goes to any model and that interpreter encounters that model, it loads the model, regardless of if it was fully initialized or not. And on the subsequent run, it just reads from the what? From the cache of what? The sys.model. And if that is so, that means it will not go back to the model. But from our traceback, it seems like it went back to the models again. And things starts becoming what? A little bit creepy. Because now we have what? From models.base model, import base model. From models.engine.file storage, import file storage. From models.base model, import base model. So it's returned back to the base model. And with this, it counters every single thing I've been saying in the video, saying that once Python goes to that path or to that model, it will not repeat the step again. It just loads from the cache, which technically means what? That I've been saying what is first. But that's not the case. I'm still correct and I'm still right. And I will show you that. So technically, Python did not import the base model on the first run. And that is what I'm trying to teach you, because whenever we're working with init or with package, the init method is what is called what? First, and not what? And not what you told what? The Python interpreter to import. So now you said what? From models of base model, import base model. The interpreter did not go to the base model. Look at it. It did not come over here. Do you know where the interpreter went to? The interpreter went to what? The init.py. And I will show that to you. So let's look at our traceback. So the traceback on the first call is coming from what? The console.py, line 2. Look at it, line 2. Python interpreter moves straight to where? To init.py. It did not go to the base model. It went where? To the init.py, which is over here. And I told you the init.py is what gets called first off whenever you have a code inside of it, when you're working with the package. So it did not go to the base model, rather it went where? It went to the init.py. And look at it, init.py. And instead of the init.py, it says from models.engine.file storage, import file storage. So it now went to the file storage. On arrival to the file storage, it now encountered from models.base model, import base model. So that was when it went to the base model, and not when the console told it to go. So it now went to the base model over here. So right now in the file storage, it checked the cache of Python interpreter, which is the sys.models, and it did not find any entry of the base model. So it now went to the base model. And look at the traceback. So right now is when it went to the base model. And on arrival to the base model, the base model said what? The base model said from models import storage. And at this instance, Python interpreter has been to the models. Remember that this package is the init itself. This models is the init itself. Whenever you call the package that has the init, what gets triggered is the init method. So at this instance, the Python interpreter has been to the init file. So what will now happen? Remember when it went to the init file, right? When we called this from models.base model, the first code that got executed was the Python interpreter rushing to what? To the init file. And look at it, after the console was the init. So it has been there. So if not for that, it even has to check the sys.models. If it checks the sys.models and see that it has loaded it to the sys.models, it will no longer go. But now we know that it has been to the init.py. So what will now happen is, okay, since I've been to the init.py, let me just go to the sys.model and presumably do what? Load what? The storage attributes. The file storage instance, which is the storage variable. And when it tries to load it from the what? From the file storage object, it cannot find it because it was partially initialized. Remember that when it got over to this init.py, it sent it immediately to the file storage. And I told you that before a model will be fully initialized, the model has to run down to the end of the model, or the interpreter has to run down to the end of the model. That is why I have this last part of file storage. Because Python is what? An interpreter language. So the interpreter has to run from top to bottom. But at this instance, the interpreter stopped over here and went to before going to the file storage. But now you're now saying, get me the storage from the file storage object. But what? It has not initialized the storage object. It has not, because it stopped at this file storage. And what will now happen? Python echoes what? Echoes an error for us and says, cannot import name storage from partially initialized models, which is this model. So he's saying this models has been initialized. That means it has an entry in the sys.models, but it was not fully initialized. And because it was not fully initialized, and you are asking for us, for me to get what? To get for you the object, which is the storage. And he's now saying, I cannot find any object called storage attached to what? To the file storage. So he says what? Most likely due to a circular import. And it says what? It gives you what? The trace, which is the init.py. So you cannot understand the drill, right? So that's the reason why we get a circular import. So do you see, even though our project now becomes very, very large, I'm still able to what? To debug and know the reason for what? The circular import. So if you just understand how the circular imports work, you can literally fix it at any instance. Literally. And now we are done. So how can we now fix it? With everything I've explained. So try fixing it. Try fixing it. Do that for me. But if we want to fix it, we can go to our base model, knowing that knowing that this init will not be fully initialized, and we're trying to get hold of the storage variable. Do you know what we can actually do? We can actually say, okay, you know what? Don't try to access any variable or any method inside of this init.py. Just what? Just do your thing. Just import. Just do your thing. Just do your thing. So we can now just come over here and comment this out and do import. So you see what we'll be doing. We'll do import models. And here we are good now. So we can now come over here and say models.storage and come over here and say models.storage. And now we are good. We've successfully done what? We've successfully fixed our code perfectly, accurately, and we're good now. So now if we run our code, and we are what? We are done, and we have what? Successfully fixed the circular import in a more efficient way. So can you see that right now we are not importing any model inside of the function? So every single import is happening at the topmost part of the model. Is it making sense? So that's basically how to fix a circular import and what a circular import is and what causes a circular import. All you need to know about. Right? So before I can explain what really happened here, I have a debug. So we make use of this print statement all over here. So I'll be using this print statement to explain what actually happened, right? So we have a lot of print statements here. And I know you can't wait and watch me type. So I will just pause the video, include them, and continue. Okay, so just a sec. Okay, so I've added all the whole print statement, right? So you look at, so we have a lot of print statements going all over this base model, right? Even in the file storage, I included a lot of prints. So I think I have, so let's just do one. So I have a lot of prints over here. And even in the console, I added print, and the init, I added print. So all these prints are in here. So I just created them before the video, right? So this is for the base model, for the file storage, the init, and the run.py, right? So this is meant to be console.py. So I just included all of the prints over here so that you can actually see what actually happened and how the Python interpreter did what operated on the models that we have, right? So that way you can understand better. So we'll go back to our console and we run our application. Perfect. So let's trace the print and see what actually happened. So immediately we run our code, what happened? The Python interpreter started from what? In the console. So in the console, so right now it's in the console. Then it moved what? To the inside of the init method. So now it's inside of the init method. We are using the print to see. So it's inside of the init method, right? Then after the init method, it went to what? Beginning of file storage. So it went to the file storage. Look at it. Then after the file storage, it went to end of base model. So it went over to here. To here. So that means after importing file storage, during this file storage import, immediately it saw from models of base model, import base model. What happens is that base model was immediately imported down to the end. Look at it. So look at end of base model. So look at end of base model. So why is this? Why is that happening? So why it happened is that when it encounters these import models, what happens? It checks the sys.models directory or path, and the sys.models. So it's actually a dictionary, right? So when it checked it, it saw that it has already imported these models. But at this instance, what is going to happen? What is going to happen is that it's not accessing anything from what? From the init file. Not that if you was to access something like file storage or storage, it's going to fail. It's going to echo an import error because it did not fully initialize these models. But at this instance, because it did not fully initialize the models, you say what? You know what? Because we are not accessing anything from the init model, let me just continue my iteration. It just does what? It just continues and gets to the what? To the down part of the base model. And after that, it does what? It says end of file storage. What happened? That means it returned back to the file storage because remember that it paused over here and tried to import this base model. So when it was done importing base model, it came back to the file storage and what? And got to the end of the file storage. Then after the file storage, it went what? After importing the file storage, which I think was coming from this init. Yeah. So it came back to the init module again. And after importing file storage, right? Then it says last part of file storage. So at this instance, it now instantiated what? This file storage instance. So last part of the file storage. Then after that, it went after importing base model. So I think that should be in the console. So yes. So it now printed after importing base model. So this is when base model was fully what? Imported. So it now did what? It now said inside base model init. So this is even when it starts what? It starts instantiating this base model object over here. So it now went back to the base model because it's not even coming over here actually. It's just getting it from the cache. So it just basically does what? It just basically instantiated because everything is now over here. So it just does what? It just instantiated what? The base model init. It just calls the base model init because know that whenever you call this, it automatically calls the init method for us, right? So it just does what? It just automatically calls the init. Everything has been imported successfully. So it just automatically calls the init. After calling the init, it says before calling models.storage.new. So it goes over here and tries to what? Call this storage.new method because we are creating a new method, right? So it just says before calling models.storage.new. So after that, it did what? It said inside the new method. So he went to the file storage new method. Look at new method. So he called the new method. Then after that, he said what again? He said before calling models. So he said after calling models.storage.new. So he came back over here and printed this after calling models.storage.new. Then after that, we went inside base model str. So he just called the str object and what? And we get our string representation and it went back to the console. And yeah, it came back to the console and we are what? Fully what? Done. It kind of makes sense, right? So this is what Python does behind the scene when what we are trying to import in this our application. And it's very, very straightforward. So how we fix the error is that the circular import we had is that what? We were not trying to what? Access anything from the what? Init method because the init method will be partially initialized. So we are not accessing anything. So for the fact that we are not accessing anything, it will just keep iterating till what? Till the init method is done initializing before we can now what? Access. So that is why we now came over here and now did models of storage. So we are now saying anytime that the models file, which is the init, is done initializing, that means loading every single attribute, method, object, or whatever that is in the init method, that is when we want to access that particular object. It makes sense. So we are not assuming that it will be done. So we are saying anytime that you are done initializing, get me the storage.new. It makes sense now. So that is how we are able to fix this whole issue of a circular import. And I think it makes a lot of sense right now because I was able to explain to you, showed you examples of how circular imports can show up in our ramification and how we can fix it. It makes sense, right? And circular imports keeps on coming. And I can show you another example. If we come to this our base model and we do model is equal to base model and we run this code again, it's going to give us a circular import. Yeah. So we have what? We have a circular import. So I need you to fix it yourself. So I'm not explaining what happened, but I will just give you the fix. So if I come over here and put underscore main and run this code. So I want you to read this traceback and understand why I did something like this. And if I run this again, it's not going to give us a circular import. And it's perfect. It's perfect. Just because I added this line. So read the traceback and know why I added this line. There was a reason for that. So circular import can still occur at any instance. So if that is the case, that means we are done what? We are done fixing the circular import. So we can now go to our console.py and do what? And call the model.save to persist our object. And if we run again, so 69, and if we go to our file storage, so we have what? We have 69. So that means it worked, right? So if we run again, 9F, it's overwriting the previous data that we had in our database. So we need to find a way to fix that. So how can we fix that? Very simple. We just have to come to the init.py and add what? And call the storage.reload. And now we should be good. If we go back to our console, run our application again, and yeah, class must be set. Okay, that means I took off this. I didn't know, it was not intentional. So I just have to come here and say if k is equal to underscore class. So we did this in the previous video. Just continue, right? And yes, we are good now. So if we go to our file.json, and perfect, we are now appending. So if we keep running, it just keeps appending the data in our database. And that is pretty much every single thing you need to know about circular imports. And it was quite a long video. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you as you stay back and watch and gain so much knowledge about how to structure your project in an efficient way. Thank you so much. That's all we have for the video. Stay safe.